It's time for your Tennessee notes. Will
Hmm.
Ward. It's time for America's favorite segment. It's Will on the Tennessee Volunteers. Will, the floor is yours. Also, well, actually, hold on. The floor is not yours just yet. Shout out to the Tennessee Volunteers fan base for coming through in a major way immediately
Yes.
for Zakai Zeigler. If you have not read about what happened, the GoFundMe's there. His family's home burned down up in New York over the past week and lost everything. And it was a brutal moment. I think his mom's here now. His mom's
Hmm.
down in
Yeah,
Knoxville.
she's here in
So
Knoxville.
tough week, obviously, and just a brutal situation for Zakai. And he's been the lifeblood of this team anyway. Like he's been just so much fun for this Tennessee team all year long. Like he's our family's favorite player. Like I think he's every Tennessee fan's favorite player at this point.
Yes.
He's the little engine that could. He's just so much fun. And I can't like part of the reason I think we all invest in Zakai is that we just know that he's going to be here for a long time. So you're
Hmm.
okay just being like, this dude's going to be a great player for Tennessee for as long as he can be here. He's going to be a ninth year senior on this team at some point. Go the folky route.
Yeah.
But I just great stuff, man. It warmed my heart to see that Tennessee and the Knoxville fans came through and immediately just poured out all kinds of just not just financial support, which is great and goes a long way, but also just like backing him immediately was really cool to see, and I know
Mhm.
he appreciated that. So now the floor is yours, but I just wanted to shout out the Tennessee fan base for that.
Well, I think that's kind of sort of important context to how the season has gone is so I mean, you think about October or November and we were discussing this team and Zakai was sort of thought of as this. I mean, frankly, he initially was brought in as an emergency backup for Kennedy Chandler in case Chandler had to miss time with injury or was in foul trouble or whatnot. It wasn't like, I mean, that first game, the preseason game against Lenore Ryan, I recall Zakai playing, I think, 8 minutes. And that
Mm-hmm.
was sort of the general expectation was he'd be like a 5 to 10 minute guy. I mean, like, you had the beat writers sort of saying like, this is the guy that is going to, open your heart, Tennessee fans and whatnot, which, you kind of take with a grain of salt because I remember reading 2 years ago that Olivier Kamwa was the next Grant Williams. And so you just, when the writers say something, you're like, okay, but I got to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, as we enter this final weekend of the season, we've seen it in spades with Zakai. I think it's not just the backstory, which is obviously amazing. This kid who, rode trains and avoided train conductors just to make it to basketball practice, moving around all the time in New York City, which is not a cheap place to live, struggling, his mother struggling through unemployment, and him, not really having real basketball interest until he made an appearance at Peach Jam and Tennessee just happened to catch it. I mean, it, you know, the thing that's beautiful about it is it's sort of what we all dream of when we see basketball players come from less than great situations. And as a white person, I feel very very privileged in how I grew up and how I was lucky to have the things I have. And a lot of these young men that play at these programs don't have that. And they're the first place of support they may experience, beyond like their own mothers, are these fan bases. And for Tennessee's fan base to show up in that way, it sort of encapsulates like this team as a whole for me. Where November we were sort of feeling things out, and you're coming off the low of losing to 12 seed Oregon State, who's really had a hell of a season this year. Great way to follow up on that, guys. But I mean, and you get to January and you lose by 28 at Rupp, and it's just like that you kind of you remember how NCAA series had Super Sim and you could
Mm-hmm.
simulate to the end of a game really quickly. That was how I was starting to feel about the season. And you're in this sort of not to be the protagonist of history here, but you're in the sort of place where I don't want to keep watching the games. I don't want to keep writing about it. I don't want to keep talking about it because it's just the same thing. It's like every year
Mm-hmm.
we do this. Every year the team is like good but not great. Every year there's just not that player that I can get attached to. And it was Admiral in that 2018-19 for me. And it was, guys like JP Prince on the Elite Eight team or Wayne Chesum or whatnot. But it didn't feel like last year's team had that. And I didn't feel like I was going to have that this year. And Zakai and to a lesser extent, Kennedy and Santiago, feel like they've provided these little pockets of joy as a fan. And I know that I'm supposed to be this sort of somewhat objective journalist that tries to be objective, but
Mm.
it's hard to do that when, it's not been like the most fun 2022 so far. You have, like, I've had personal events I've talked about, but I've also, I mean, there's like a global crisis going on. COVID is still going on. And you look for these little pockets of escapism to find every week that you can just get lost in for a couple of hours at a time. And Tennessee basketball has been that. And Zakai Zeigler has been the leader of that because he's just different. He's built different in a way where, maybe he's not statistically the best player in the team, but I don't care. Every time he shoots, I get excited. Every time the ball is in his hands, I perk up. Every time he comes into the game and it's him and Kennedy, I'm like, all right, let's go. This is the lineup.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would have been one thing for them to sort of do the usual, be like a good, not great team. But we're entering this final weekend of the season where Tennessee can go 14-4 in SEC play, which would be one of the best records they've ever posted in program history. And, I know that they've had some performances that have looked sloppier than others. I know, like, scoring 48 at Arkansas is that sucked to watch. But, I mean, growing up watching this program under Buzz Peterson and, sort of making it through the Conzo and Tyndall Wilderness years, you sort of gain an appreciation anytime there is this little unique pocket of happiness that comes with, wins are nice, but it's the players that you get really attached to. And I felt that was Ziegler this year. And I know this is turning into a rant, but
No, yeah.
I mean, it's sort of helped me rediscover why I became a fan in the first place. Like I've become to this point a little tranquil with March. I understand, like, Rick Barnes, not a great March coach statistically. But I mean, even with that being said, they've accomplished so much. They've won so many games, and they've provided me with such an amount of joy this season. And that escapism that I mentioned, just wonderful to get away for 2 hours twice a week and watch them run a steamroller and run over opposing offenses. And they get stuck in the mud. And I don't know. I imagine that this is how Grizzlies fans felt about Tony Allen and Zach Randolph. It's how I feel about watching this team. And that concludes my rant, and I think they will beat Arkansas on Saturday by 6 points. Precisely 6 points. A nice close game, one that you can sweat through. And good thing it's early, so I can just go enjoy the rest of my day, win or lose.
I don't know. So Kennedy, like, when he runs the pick and roll, when he gets aggressive, it's a different thing for Tennessee. It's an element that we sorely will need come tournament time. Like, that is something that, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I was looking at, because I was curious. I was like, where's he popping up on draft boards right now? And he's the end of the first round on a lot of stuff that I'm looking at. And I'm like, Keon was kind of in the same spot, but I think Keon was seen as more of like, he's for sure, like, he's probably a borderline lottery guy just because he can jump out of the gym and just because people just assume there's untapped potential there because of the clunkiness of our offense last year. It was just that, like, we can't look too much into it. You put him into an NBA scheme, he'll figure some stuff out. I love Keon and I miss him. And I just wonder, if you're Kennedy, man, now that NIL is a thing, like, if I'm Rick Barnes, I'm talking to Kennedy, I'm like, I don't know. Like, are you with me where I look at my notes and I'm like, he has a lot of growing to do, man. Like, he has a lot of growing to do. And look, your players should do whatever they feel, but Kennedy Chandler might need to consider coming back at least for one more year. He seems like a guy who could really use some more polishing and some more play, because, like, I don't know, we see it in spurts. Like, he's a very inconsistent player. Like, we see it in spurts. The most frustrating thing about Kennedy Chandler is his free throws. Like, if you could explain to me why this play, like, Kennedy's got a great smooth stroke. Like, he's a great shooter. Like, he has great touch around the rim. He should be, by all accounts, a great free throw shooter. That man is a terrible free throw shooter. And if we get in a situation where we need Kennedy Chandler because he's attacking and getting fouled late, and we lose a game in the tournament by 4 because Kennedy Chandler missed 4 free throws, I'm going to lose my mind, because that is something that I am already forecasting. Can you explain it? Like, what is this? But that 2 parts.
Well, so
there
There was some broadcast, it might have been a Tom Hart and Jimmy Dykes one, where their theory was Chandler leans back too far when he shoots the
Hmm.
ball, and that is causing them to all be short. Because you notice a bunch of them are short,
Yeah.
or or he's overcompensating and hitting them, off the back iron. And
Mhm.
I have started looking for it in games, and I don't have like an objective way of doing this, but subjectively, it does seem to go in a little more when he leans in, when he stays
Hmm.
forward with it, leans into it. Because in the season he's at 63%, which is
Yeah.
kind of pretty bad for a point guard. I mean,
Mhm.
point guards you're generally thinking are going to be like 80% guys.
Mhm.
So it definitely helps that you have Ziegler shooting 88%. But if Chandler can sort of figure that out, and it does seem to me that he's been practicing it more frequently lately, like in the warm-ups before games, he takes several. And so
Hmm.
I've wondered if that's been a point of emphasis of late. Kind of needs to be, but I, I I don't know, man. It's tough because that's a flaw, and then I don't love how much he shoots or how bad he is at floaters. I would say I don't
Yeah.
feel like those go in very often. It was a little miraculous that the one against Auburn did.
It's the reverses that I feel way more comfortable with. It's weird, but he's
Mhm.
like more comfortable in traffic where he's having to go up and under. Like he's really comfortable with the up and under. But floaters, like you said, he's not his thing. He's not a John Fulkerson with the floater game. It's not really his.
He's no Euros with the floater.
No, that's more of like a putt, a shot putt.
I was
Um,
watching them warm up before one game, and Euros is attempting floaters from the free throw line. I'm just like, just shoot it. Stop being
don't
strange.
if it's not broken, don't fix it, man.
Yeah,
We'll end on this. Stats by Will. It's in your name. What stats in college basketball jump out to you over the past week? What do you got for me
I've
in
got a
America?
couple. So I'm gonna do. So I got curious about this a couple of
Hmm.
days ago. Um,